Hello, everybody in StockTwits Nation. We are back with another executive interview. Today, we have Lisa Conte, President, CEO of Jaguar Health. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. This is my first time doing this interview with StockTwits, so thanks for inviting me.
We're excited to have you here and excited to get right down to business. So, for folks who might be new to the Jaguar story, Jaguar Health, can you give us the quick origin story? So, how did it get started? What's the core mission that drives the company today, especially the work you're doing with plant-based medicines and GI health?
Absolutely. Okay, I'll take those in reverse order. We do all plant-based medicines, prescription medicines. So we start with knowledge of healers and shamans in the rainforest and sort of demystify how these traditional medicines are being used, bring them into a Western medical system, and then seek the active ingredients that can be prescription products. We did take a product all the way from a tree growing in the rainforest to a first-in-class FDA-approved agent called crofelemer. It is commercialized under the name Mytesi, and that one active molecule, which works like nothing else that's in development or on the market for gastrointestinal disorders, is a pipeline within a product, initially on the market for people living with HIV/AIDS, finished a phase 3 clinical trial for cancer therapy-related diarrhea, has clinical trials that are published for irritable bowel syndrome, for rare diseases such as short bowel syndrome and congenital diarrheal diseases. So that one nugget of traditional knowledge is keeping us busy in late-stage clinical development for now until for years. The one thing I can say about where did this come from, 30 plus years ago, I was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. I was a venture capitalist in the healthcare area at the time, and I saw these traditional medicines being used halfway up the mountain. It was sort of green goop coming out of bottles, and it was a light bulb moment at that moment. Could we do more efficient drug discovery and development by leveraging knowledge of products and plants that have been in man for thousands of years, therefore more likely to be safe and effective? And that's how it all started, and it's still going.
That is fascinating. I have so many questions for you, but just the fascinating link between finding these more, I guess, natural remedies that have existed in cultures and places throughout the world. How do you uncover or discover where those opportunities are? Like, do you have relationships in local regions with communities there? I'm curious how you make that link and then develop those products for mass market usage.
It's so fascinating. What we do is an intellectual exchange. We send Western trained physicians who are culturally sensitive and ethnobotanists, botanists who study how plants are used for just traditional purposes, and they do a consult with a shaman in the rainforest. They describe signs and symptoms. I'll give you an easy one, like diabetes. You would say, oh, the patient has sweet urine. The ants run to and from their urine. If the patient doesn't take his medicine every day, his or her medicine every day, they don't thrive. And then the shamans and the healers point to the different plants that they use for different symptoms, and it becomes a prioritization process when we bring them home. It's low throughput screening, typically in whole animal models, so that we're not constrained by known mechanisms of action on a molecular level. And that's the opportunity. By following something that has a symptom, we can then find new ways of treating and potentially curing diseases because we're not constrained by known mechanisms of action. Now we go to GI. Our lead product we kept prioritizing is crofelemer, which normalizes gastrointestinal function and so has some indications for diarrhea, some for abdominal pain. And there's nothing else that works by this mechanism of action. And it has just highlighted the benefit of traditional medicine. Sometimes people say traditional medicine is old-fashioned medicine. It's not sophisticated. Well, what's more sophisticated than living in the village, in the home with your patient to see how they're responding to a particular treatment? And the last thing I do want to say is everything that we do is prescription medicine. So our product, Mytesi, for example, crofelemer, is plant-based, it's natural, it's sustainably harvested, it's organic, it's fair trade, and it's an FDA-approved drug. And one other thing, we are the only oral drug approved by the FDA under botanical guidance. And under botanical guidance, there's no practical pathway to bring a generic to market. So we essentially have exclusivity to infinity and beyond. We don't have those patent cliffs that you read about with other companies.
Oh, that's interesting. Is there like a simple reason for why that's the case in this instance, or is it just unique to your space that you have that advantage?
There's a couple of reasons, but a simple one to explain is under botanical guidance, you need to do a bioassay to release your product. So most generics have a chemical specifications, and the generic companies reverse engineer from that target that they have of the chemical specifications. The biological assay is not in the public domain. So nobody
Oh.
knows what to reverse engineer from. There's other reasons, but that's sort of a simple explanation.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really cool. And you mentioned GI earlier on, and I live in New York. I'm in my 30s. I can't tell you how many friends I have that are seeking specialists and other doctors for gut health. I feel like you were probably on this very early, but this is something I've literally had 3 conversations in the past couple of weeks with people who are going to specialist doctors and seeking out kind of the root of that. So I think that's interesting. And you've called 2025 a year of catalysts for Jaguar, and it's getting investors' attention. So whether it's within the GI stuff you mentioned or other spaces, what are the biggest milestones that you have on the radar leading this company? Clinical readouts or FDA moments, partnerships? What are some of the things you're looking ahead to?
Thank you for bringing up that word. This 2025 is the year of catalyst. And pharmaceutical drug development is tough because it's a long road. It takes sometimes decades to get a product approved. You start a clinical trial and you sort of got nothing to say, for 2 years while you have a placebo-controlled trial going on. So it just so happens that activities that we started 6 years ago, 8 years ago, are all converging to give catalysts right now. So some just happened. A big, huge one just happened about 2 weeks ago in our rare disease program with crofelemer, our active agent, for something called MVID. It's a congenital diarrheal disorder. It's ultra rare in children where they can't absorb the nutrients of life. So they live on parenteral nutrition, IV nutrition. That's it, IV food for their entire life. And they typically die around 11, 12, 13 years old because of damage to the liver, to the kidneys, or infections from the port because they're having IV nutrition. It was unheard of that something might be able to reduce their dependence on parenteral nutrition, even 5 or 10%. They could have a night off. They could go to school for a day, something, whatever. We just put out proof of concept data, the first patient, where they reduced their parenteral nutrition by 27%. The investigators at this conference where it was presented, which is the Pediatric Elite Gastrointestinal Conference in Abu Dhabi about 2 weeks ago, it was, essentially a virtual standing ovation. So that was a major catalyst that just happened. Now, throughout 2025 and into 2026, there are 5 clinical efforts going on in both MVID and another rare disease called short bowel syndrome, where also those patients exist on parenteral nutrition about 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. We also put out proof of concept data there where we reduced their parenteral nutrition in the first 8 weeks by 11%, and that will continue to generate data. So you're just going to see the gift that just keeps giving of proof of concept data and double-blind placebo-controlled data throughout, as I said, 25 and into the first half of 2026. Lots and lots of news. Then, if we go to a different indication, or a different formulation of crofelemer, so the same active ingredient, but in a different formulation, and therefore a different product. It's called Mytesi. It's currently commercialized for people living with HIV/AIDS. We've completed a phase 3 clinical trial for cancer, prophylaxis for cancer therapy-related diarrhea, and in particular, targeted agents. These are the agents that patients stay on in a metastatic situation for the rest of their life, 5, 10, 15 years. Metastatic patients are now living 5, 10, 15 years on these targeted therapies. All these targeted therapies work by a mechanism that induces the type of watery secretory diarrhea that crofelemer based on its unique mechanism of action from the rainforest, how we did the discovery, normalizes. And we're going to be meeting with the FDA this quarter, the second quarter of 2025. The goal is to define the pathway to be able to file for breast cancer patients where we achieve statistical significance. We didn't in all patients that were in the trial, but we did with the breast cancer patients, to bring Mytesi to an expanded indication. Mytesi's out there. It's the same dose, the same bottle, the same formulation. But until we get an FDA label that expands it to prophylaxis in breast cancer patients, we can't promote to that indication. So that's another huge catalyst this year. And then with those catalysts in these two major programs, and we got other stuff going on, but in those two major programs, what we're seeking in this financial environment is business development relationships that bring in funding so that we are no longer raising money for our cash flow to fund these programs, but partners who will get rights outside of the United States. We have global unencumbered rights to our products, will help fund the programs and stem the dilution and the fundraising, particularly in this financial environment.
Well, first I gotta say it's so helpful to hear you talk about the state of your business, but you're providing context around sort of how these things work on the back end with pharma. Because I think, a lot of investors are interested in pharma, but it's not not a business a lot of us are on the inside of. And so even learning about kind of like the length that stages take to go through, and it's just super helpful. So I appreciate you breaking that all down. A couple of follow-ups based on what you said. The first one, I'm curious, like FDA, like what's that been like? So you say these are long timelines working with the FDA, and I'm curious, like when there's a turnover in an administration, do you lose ground or anything if when that happens, or is there continuity across administrations? Like, does anything change when kind of there's a new sheriff in town?
Hmm. Well, yeah, to be seen at this moment, for example, for our meeting on cancer for breast cancer patients. That meeting was scheduled after the new administration came in. And so far, all our reviewers are still there, and that meeting is still happening. So good there. On other thoughts with regulatory issues, for example, the rare disease. There's a program in Europe. The FDA of Europe is called the EMA, and they have a program called Prime. And Prime is an opportunity for rare diseases where there's nothing else out there. And MVID is absolutely in that category. There's nothing out there for those patients. They're going to die when they're 11, 12, 13 years old. You get, if you qualify for Prime, you get greater assistance and guidance and greater attention and potentially an expedited approval for the 27 EU countries. And then you can take that and you can bring it to the FDA in the United States under something called breakthrough designation and do the same thing. So, there might be a little unrest going on to come. We haven't experienced it yet in the FDA. Our initial focus already had been to go through the EMA because of Prime. And with Prime, you could qualify again for this MVID, since it's ultra rare, there's nothing else out there, with literally a couple of patients. 3 patients could, in fact, be 1 to 2% of the entire patient population. And the industry loves rare diseases now because rare diseases in general, much smaller clinical trials, you're talking about single digits or dozens of patients, not thousands, which therefore is less expensive. You get greater regulatory assistance and communication, and you get less pushback on the reimbursement because these are patients that can cost up to $1 million a year with their complications. So small number of patients, high incentive to get these products developed. You get good reimbursement. You have family access groups. So it's a business model that's very much in vogue with those who we are counting on to partner with to help fund the rest of these programs. The last thing I'll say is Bobby Kennedy has been involved historically, well before he was doing now, as an environmental advisor to the company. And, so the fact that we are prescription drugs, but we are natural, we're plant-based, we're supportive care, quality of life, dignity for the patient, as well as an opportunity to stay on their life-saving medicines. cancer and HIV is not something that's going to be changed by eating better. You got cancer, you need chemo agents, you need supportive care to be able to stay on those agents. I think that's not really in the crosshairs of the administration right now.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting insight of just having that continuity relationship wise must be potentially helpful to you all as you continue on your path. I know that I have a couple more minutes with you. I want to ask about kind of the balance sheet side of the business. So 2024 numbers, strong revenue growth, up over 50% in Q4. Still still running at a loss. And so I'm curious with the strategy as investors look at this. Obviously, this is, you're laying out a picture where this is a growth opportunity, an interesting market for investors. How would you articulate the strategy to narrow that gap? Are you thinking of if that's the partnerships you mentioned? Is it raising more capital? What's sort of the game plan there as investors evaluate?
So you said it, the partners. So the combination of the catalysts this year, and as I said, we're sort of lucky that we have a convergence of catalysts in our two major programs, which are two separate, each huge, blockbuster, certainly in terms of the impact on patients' life, but for all the stakeholders in the company, including the shareholders, two separate business development opportunities, two major shots on goal. And there is a third. We have a small program in animal health, and we have a product, interestingly, approved by the FDA, an FDA-approved drug by the Center of Veterinary Medicine, crofelemer, the same active ingredient for chemotherapy-induced diarrhea in dogs. Now, interesting, in the United States, if you have cancer and you have diarrhea, we can legitimately promote you a product if you're a dog, but not a human yet.
Wow.
And dogs are a beautiful predictive model of the human situation from the mechanism of where we work in the gut. That's not our main business, the veterinary business. So I don't have distribution and commercialization, broad capabilities in that area. We do it very narrowly now to chemo centers. So we are in discussions with potential animal health partners to expand that to general diarrhea in doggies. And so that's another major business development opportunity to bring in funding, what we call the non-dilutive dollars, not selling stock, selling access to the 35 years, $500 million that has gone into the development of this company, this approach, an FDA-approved product. It's quite a journey, as you know. So those are three areas that will help fill that gap in the balance sheet. And it's a major goal and a major strategy of the company. You have to be that way in this financing environment right now.
Amazing. Super interesting on the dog front. I imagine also in addition to just fundraising, the awareness play you get. If someone has a dog with it who is having an issue that's solved by something, and then they hear about that same thing later on, that's got to help with just marketing. So really, really interesting stuff. Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you coming on. Really appreciate, again, just like educating our investors around pharma and how that all works. Lisa Conte, President, CEO, and member of the Board of Directors at Jaguar Health. Thank you so much. You'll have to come back on when you have a big update for us.
Thank you. Would love to do it. Great questions. Good job.